Maduro is finally in U.S. custody, a full-blown communist dictator grabbed on narco-terror charges for what he's done to Americans. What you're not going to hear about on CNN and MSNBC is the same sort of movement that got him and Hugo Chavez in power in Venezuela is happening right now in our media, in our schools, because of the political agenda from the so-called Uniparty. We're talking about people who would like to end America. It's not an accident. It's not incompetence. It's called a manufactured crisis, a war to end America as we know it. My guest tonight is former White House economist and author of Manufactured Crisis, The War to End America, James Simpson. He's been tracking how the progressive left has been attacking this country from within for decades. Who's trying to end America, Jim?
The same people who have been trying to end it for over 100 years. Go all the way back to Karl Marx. Their one singular goal was to destroy capitalism. And as the main enemy, as it were, the biggest capitalist country in the world that ever existed, we are the ones who they have to destroy. And, they talk about all these kinds of utopian solutions to follow, but really, Marx was pretty vague about what that would look like. All they really were very good at, and they've proven it, as you know, over and over again, is destroying things. They are like gorillas with a wrecking bar, and that's about the best you can say of them.
Well, let's go back to 100 years then. You said they've been doing it for about 100 years. The progressive movement, many don't know this, started in about 1920, something like that. Yeah. And this has been from outside sources and inside sources. What I've never been able to understand, Jim, and maybe you can help me understand this, is why. Yeah. Is it just so they could be the monarchs, just so they could sit at the throne and rule over all of us? Why hate capitalism, freedom, and liberty? I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, it really is pretty hard to understand, frankly. And as I have said in an earlier book, before they had actually ever implemented it in any nation, they could fantasize all they wanted about how wonderful their utopian future would be,
right,
and how terrible capitalism was. And, during the Industrial Revolution in Britain, there were people starving, and it wasn't a universally attractive picture. And then, of course, we had the czars in Russia and, the kings who basically owned pretty much everything, and everybody else had to get along with what they could. So, the picture of that world at that time didn't look all that good. But the fact of the matter is that all the people that were so upset about it, well, for one thing, the Great Britain example wasn't a result of free market capitalism. The Great Britain result was the direct result of government policy, where governments ordered people out of the countryside into the cities to fill the factories. And then, of course, wages plummeted, and there was a lot of very poor people, but it was government policy. It wasn't free market capitalism. And that's where they get a lot of these things wrong. And Karl Marx was wrong about practically everything. But the funniest thing about him was that he came from a wealthy family. And if you look at all of these people, they were all spoiled brat, rich kids of wealthy parents.
Well, Jim, hold on, because that sounds awfully familiar. That sounds like the Antifa people today. These are a bunch of wealthy, well-to-do white kids that are putting on masks and outfits and beating people up and shouting people down and breaking the law. Is that just an offshoot of the way it was back then?
It, as I say in my book on Karl Marx, it is a personality characteristic. It is not. It was not simply a reflection of Marx's personality. It was a personality type. Rich, entitled kids who think they know everything, don't have to be told everything, think they're entitled to everything, and all they have to do is come up with some simple solution to cure the world, and they will congratulate themselves on how brilliant and intelligent they are. And if you disagree with them, good God, they're talking about utopia. You're an enemy. You
Yeah.
have to be an enemy. You have to be destroyed because you're getting in the way of their fantasized, wonderful future. And then the trouble is, even though it's been tried 100 times over and over again and shown to be an abject failure every single time for many reasons, which I get into in the book, um, they still are so arrogant. They believe that this time they'll get it right. This time, well, those other folks in Russia and in Nicaragua and wherever the heck else, they just weren't smart enough.
They just
But
didn't do it right. Yeah.
yeah, we are the really smart ones, and we'll get it right. And the conditions haven't changed. America is this huge patriarchal, racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic society that just seeks its own wealth and its own privilege at everybody else's expense.
Wow.
But as you know, uh, uh, they're just talking about themselves. They're just projecting who
Right.
they are as people, not who we are, but who they are as people.
The book is called Manufactured Crisis, The War to End America. It's James Simpson. You can go to his website. It is crisisnow.net. We appreciate the time. So what we're watching happen right now, we'll go back and forth from 100 years ago to now as we do the conversation. But what we're seeing right now, I went on X yesterday, and for some reason, I had For You ticked instead of following. And when that happens, I guess Elon Musk thinks I need to see every left-wing nut job in my feed. So I'm reading what they're writing, and there are a bunch of people that are clearly, in my mind, paid to post videos of ICE is beating up a pregnant woman. ICE is separating families. ICE arrested a 13-year-old American citizen. ICE is. And all ICE really is a law enforcement arm that's enforcing the law. If these cities would cooperate and turn people over that ICE wanted, these detainers that they're asking for, none of these raids would be happening. ICE is not doing anything other than enforcing the law. So how does it work, James? How does it work? Because these people clearly are colluding to write the same narrative over and over and over again to convince people that are reading it that it's true when clearly they're lying. Is that the first step? You propagandize and you use information as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm working on a book right now where I talk about the greatest enemy of America is the legacy media. And Stalin knew that. He said, if I could control Hollywood, I could rule the world. And they began penetrating communists into main news organizations.
Right.
And in fact, one of the most famous ones was Edward R. Murrow,
Really?
who you recall was
They're giving out awards for this
anchor.
guy. They're giving out awards of journalism for Edward R. Murrow. He was a communist?
Well, put it this way: when he was a young guy, he was in charge of the International Institute for Education, and when Hitler took power, communist professors of the School for Social Research in Frankfurt, Germany, commonly called the Frankfurt School,
Right.
were forced to beat feet. They were both communists, and most of them were Jewish as well. So they left, and they were all resettled by Edward R. Murrow, who headed the International Institute of Education, and its job was to place these displaced professors in universities, and he put most of them, at Columbia University Teachers College, where they came up with critical theory. And critical theory comes directly out of Marx, who said we must employ a ruthless criticism of everything existing. And he meant everything existing in the West. And they took that up and turned it into a, quote, philosophy that they wrote an article about called Critical and traditional legal theory, and we've got all the offsprings from that. We have critical race theory, we have critical legal theory, we have critical women's studies, we have critical Latino studies, we have critical pedagogy. There's about 100 of them. And the idea was to criticize everything and then focus on smaller and smaller segments of society that could then be torn apart and criticized. So
divide and conquer. It very basically divide and conquer.
It is absolutely, at the bottom line, a military strategy of divide and conquer. That is all it is, and that is exactly what it is.
I keep asking
And
this,
Edward
Jim.
Amuro,
I'm a guy who's won a lot of awards in journalism. I've done it right. I know how to do it.
Hmm.
So again, I still am not getting the why. Marx is a rich kid growing up. These Antifa people are a bunch of rich kids. The oligarchy in this country wants to take over. People like Dan Goldman, extremely rich. He's a billionaire. Is out there complaining about we're taking away health care. It's so stupid. I don't yet understand the why. If they get what they want, where would Marx have sat? On the top of society? Does Goldman become a monarch and get a crown? What is the end game? Because when I go to work every day, like when you write a book, you have a goal. The goal would be to sell books and educate people on what it is that you wrote about. My goal on my show every day, have listeners enjoy it, have listeners get something out of it, and maybe tell other people about it. We know as normal people what our goals are. What was Marx's goal? What is Dan Goldman's goal? What is Chuck Schumer's goal? I don't get it.
well, I think at the bottom line, it's ye shall be as gods.
Really?
You
It's a
know,
power. They
yeah,
think that they're above us.
absolutely. Absolutely. Ye shall be as gods. And if you look at it in a practical sense, forgetting about the biblical passage, um, all of those people want wealth and power. Marx was a spoiled brat rich kid. He used up all his parents' money, and then he spent the rest of his life pilfering money from Engels, who stole it from his equally wealthy uh, businessman father through their petty cash account. And Marx hovered around ailing relatives, waiting for them to die so he could see how much he'd make
Wow.
in the inheritance. And he would write these letters to Engels, telling him how joyous he was that Uncle so and so had just kicked off, and he might be able to get $1,000 out of it or something. And so uh, all of these people, the Castro brothers, their father was a wealthy plantation owner. At age 13, they staged a rebellion against their own
At
father's
13.
plantation at age 13. And they got kicked out of 2 private schools. They were just spoiled brat, arrogant little rich kids who wanted to be on top of the world. And they share that in common. The bottom line, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. And the revolution to these people who push it, who are the ones guiding this agenda, is power and wealth and nothing else. Because absolutely, you see, once they get in power, there's nothing that can dislodge them, and they'll murder you if you try. Or they'll maybe just murder you anyway.
Right.
Um, and so it even after it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt how absolutely destructive the whole idea of communism as an economic system is. And I argue it. In fact, Vladimir Lenin, the first leader of the Soviet Union, said the same thing, that communism is not an ideology. Instead, it is a body of strategies for us to seize and hold power. And that's exactly
Crisisnow.net.
what it is.
That's the website, crisisnow.net. It's James Simpson. Follow him, James M. Simpson, over on X, and get the book called Manufactured Crisis, The War to End America. Let's get into the realm of things where we don't have to do too much research because it happened recently. Barack Obama gets elected, a community organizer, never had a real job, was raised by his white grandparents in Hawaii, yet he was somehow the North Side Chicago kid that was going to do everything for the black community. What we really saw was a guy who was a communist. He was actually educated as a communist or a Marxist, in my opinion, and he tried to employ Cloward and Piven. Cloward and Piven was written, I believe, by a couple of Pinhead college professors the year I was born. I think it was 1966, around there. And
Yep.
the overview of that, and I want you to go in depth if you don't mind. The overview of
Sure.
that is, let's make the economy go broke so that we can make everybody reliant on the central government. I believe
Yes.
Barack Obama tried to do that by adding, what, 48 million people on entitlement, something like that, making so many more
Well,
Americans reliant on government while separating the races. Take it from there. He tried to do Cloward and Piven, and we're still seeing the denigration of our economic status because of what he did for 8 years. Am I close on Cloward and Piven?
yeah. Well, he did some of it. He did the expansion of welfare through or health care
Right.
through his Affordable Care Act, which is vastly more expensive than it would have been
Yes.
than it was before. He also did it through open borders. He's the one who instigated the open borders agenda in 2012 when he declared the DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and
Right.
DAPA for parents. And that was really a signal to his allies in Central America to start forcing people to leave. And I go into that in great length, especially about Guatemala, where 60% of these kids came from, or actually not kids,
Right.
teenagers, parents, people of all ages came from. I go into that in a great bit, but Bill Clinton really started it with the subprime mortgage crisis, which was a deliberate strategy to collapse our economy. And
Wait, and
it
for those
was,
who don't know, and I want to jump on that if you don't mind. It was
yeah,
a Clinton policy through Fannie Mae, I believe, where they were giving
yes,
subprime mortgages that only lasted 2 years. They knew everybody was going to be foreclosed upon, which would ruin the housing market. Again, Jim, I'm not as smart as you. Why do you want to collapse the housing market? Why did he want to do that? He did it. That's fact. I mean, the New York Times even reported on it back in the day. So why? Why would you want to collapse the market? What does that do for him?
well, he was trying to destroy our economy, and he pretty much succeeded. He created the second largest recession, or the largest recession since the Great Depression. And but it started with Clinton, and the thing was they ordered the banks to provide ninja loans, no income, no job, no asset loans to people who could not afford to repay. And they forced them, they threatened them if they didn't do it, but then they offered a carrot. And the carrot was that Freddie Mae, Financial National Mortgage Association, and Ginnie Mae, the General National Government
Right.
National Mortgage Association, would underwrite the cost. So, in other words, they socialized the risk. And so banks went wild, giving away as many subprime mortgages as they wanted. And the whole idea was and the government uh, promised to provide $3 trillion between 1990 and 2000 to support these subprime mortgages. And so the banks had nothing to lose, but everybody knew that it would create a massive housing bubble, then a massive housing collapse. And you have to understand, these people could care less about what happens to housing, what happens to the economy, what happens to the poor, what happens to anything, because their goal, once again, is to destroy capitalism. It doesn't go any further than that. But
And the way
that
you destroy
wasn't the first.
capitalism, again, you've got my brain working in 30 different ways. The way you
Yeah,
destroy capitalism is making everybody reliant on the government. So you give them subprime loans to people who didn't really qualify, that they're going to
right.
lose the house in 2 years. Now their housing needs are reliant on the government. Or if they lose their job, now their money needs are reliant on the government. If they lose their food source, now their food needs are
Yeah,
reliant on the government. This was all about making everybody look to the central government as the provider of all, right?
yeah. Well, and the very first Cloward Piven strategy, they wrote in 1966 a article called "The Way to the Poor: A Strategy to End Poverty."
Right.
And their idea, and this is very interesting because Richard Cloward was the inspiration for President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program. Most people don't know that. It was Richard Cloward's idea.
Did not know that.
And Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, these two sociology professors, both communists, teaching at the time at Columbia University, um, posited that if they could pack the welfare rolls with so many welfare recipients, the government couldn't possibly satisfy all those demands, and the government would collapse. And in its place, they would offer a guaranteed annual income for every American. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you add up the money, if you're paying between $40,000 and $80,000 per family of four, uh, instead of welfare. And of course, we know the welfare system would not have been replaced by that. It would just been an add-on because you can't get rid of government programs, or at least the Democrats would be unwilling to. Um, you're just further burdening society. And Lenin said it early on, back in the early 1900s. He said, create crisis whenever possible. And if you can't create it, invent the idea and then convince everybody and it's real. And in the process, profit from it in any way you can, including financially. And when that crisis comes to a head, propose a solution that will create even a bigger crisis.
Wow.
And so that's exactly what Cloward and Piven were doing, creating a bigger crisis. And then when they were done with that, which caused the almost bankruptcy of New York City in 1975, they moved on to voting and spent 10 years studying voting and wrote the National Voter Registration Act, what we know as Motor Voter,
Right.
which allows illegal aliens free access to our voting system through automatic voter registration at motor vehicle department welfare offices, essentially turning the government into a taxpayer-funded voter registration drive for Democrats. And at the same time, creating an opportunity for groups like ACORN, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, which was started by a guy named Wade Rathke, who was one of Richard Cloward's understudies, to flood the voting system with bogus registrations, overwhelming the system with demands for services to create chaos during voting, which would allow them to create vote fraud. And I'm sure you probably remember my good friend Anita Moncrief, who unfortunately passed this year. She was working for Obama in 2008, and she realized, she saw the vote fraud that was going on, and she, unlike most Democrats, had integrity. And she went to Andrew Breitbart and told him about it, and she became one of Breitbart's biggest stars. And, we became friends, and she talked about this stuff all the time. But Cloward and Piven created the voting system we had today, or a better way to say it, they enabled the voting system we have today.
Yeah, but you have to understand that there's no voter fraud. We were told that. In fact, there's no widespread voter. It's funny because they say there's no fraud whatsoever, 100% solid alike. Well, there just wasn't widespread voter fraud. The fact is, I had Harmeet Dillon on the other day, the deputy or the assistant attorney general for civil rights, and she said 260,000 dead or ineligible voters that we've already found. We haven't gotten all the voting rolls back yet. So you're right. They were flooding the system. Absolutely. So here's the question. And by the way, go and get his book. It's called Manufactured Crisis, The War to End America. It is James Simpson. You're going to go and follow him, James M. Simpson, over on X. That is the book right there, my friend. We appreciate you putting that up. So when we look at exactly what's going on, we know it's happening. Trump, for his first 4 years, slowed it, didn't stop it. These 4 years, he has a chance to slow it down, but they're going to inject about $5 billion to try to get the House of Representatives back so they can impeach the guy every day. What can regular Americans watching and listening right now, Jim? What can we do? How can we raise our awareness to all this disinformation, misinformation, and all the lies that are being dumped on our faces every day on social media and elsewhere? What do we do right now?
Well, of course, I wouldn't be a good salesman if I didn't say read my book. But my book has a whole chapter devoted to that very question. And you know what I say? The very first thing we all need to do the very first thing we all need to do is pray. We need to
I'm with
ask
you.
God for help. We
Yes.
need to ask God for help because the reason we are in the position we are in today, which is a combination of our own natures and a deliberate strategy by the communists to separate us from the church and to discredit the church, discredit Christianity, and this is the result.
They want to be the higigher power, right? They want to be the deity.
They,
That's where you got to get
exactly.
religion out of the way.
Yeah, and as Romans, as it says in Romans, we gave them over to a debased mind, and that's exactly what's happened. Because when people say, "Okay, God, never mind, we can do it ourselves," this is the kind of stuff we wind up with, and people take the place of God, and people at best are flawed, and the ones who rise to the top are usually the very worst, and that's what we've got today. And so the most important thing coming up that we need to deal with is the election. And the thing that infuriates me is that nobody in the in the Congress is really doing that much to try to address that. I mean, we have the the uh,
The
voter
FEC.
ID
Yeah.
voter ID Act, but that's not going to pass the Senate. We have to
It
have
can if you get rid of the filibuster. And let me ask you
well,
about that.
right.
Would that be the right thing to do? In 1975, as you know, they decided to
Yeah.
say you don't have to filibuster anymore. You can just say that you're going to filibuster and not do anything. James A. Polk, when he put it in place, literally put the filibuster in to make the Senate stop arguing and get the bill to his desk. They've now made it
Right.
exactly the opposite of what the initial intention was. And in
Yeah.
1975, you can just raise your hand and say, "Hey, we feel like filibuster. I'm going to go grab some lunch now." Shouldn't we go
Yeah.
back to the way it was? You actually have to argue until you can't anymore, and then it goes to
Yeah.
the president. You can get voter ID done. You get a whole lot of stuff done if you did that. Should we go back to what it used to be or get rid of it?
Yeah. Yes. Either or. Getting rid of it. Well, here's the thing. You always have to think about the next term. If we don't get rid of it now, the Democrats will get rid of it. Then they'll do whatever the heck they
Of
want.
course they will.
Okay. But that's a risk that I think we need to take because, frankly, we're on the edge of the precipice and we don't have, if we lose the elections in Congress in the next 2 years, I think we're pretty much done because Trump will have his both hands tied behind his back, fighting off everything that they're going to do, and then they'll find a way to steal the election in 2028, and then that'll be the end of our country. That will be the end of our country because the
Yeah.
Democrats long ago decided that they wanted to be on the winning side, and they believe the winning side is with the communists. And
It's
so they've been working hand in glove with them, and not everyone, of course, but most of them, and definitely the leadership. They changed, and they changed for the absolute worst, and it was for utterly selfish reasons. And the funny thing is that if the communists take over, they might not be lined up against a wall immediately. There's an order of execution for those different groups of people once the communists take over. They'd be third or fourth down the line, but they're not going to share power with the communist Chinese or
right.
the Russians or anybody else. They'll be tolerated for as long as they're useful, and then they will be executed or sent to the gulag. And my more likely executed. And so,
Manufactured Crisis: The War to End America is the book. I want to make sure people go and get it, James. It's over on Amazon. Get that book.
yeah,
Also, he's got a book out called "The Day Christmas Didn't Come." You're a former White
yeah,
House economist. Let me ask you about. Yeah, we'll show that again. Boom! Look at that. The Christmas that didn't come. Is it that
yeah,
didn't come? Yeah, the day Christmas didn't come is the name of the book. Go and grab that one as well.
yeah.
But in the time we have remaining, which isn't a whole lot, but I'm getting such great information from you. Has President Trump made the right economic moves, or is there something he
Yeah.
should have done or should start doing that he's not doing yet?
Well, no, I think he's doing everything right. I think he's slashing regulations like more than any other president in history, which is massive relief and frees up the economy. He's bringing back fossil fuels, absolutely critical. And that huge tax cut in his big, beautiful bill is absolutely critical. And the tariffs, the, the stock market took a nosedive when he finally announced the tariffs, or actually imposed them. But in the long run, that will help bring manufacturing back to in fact, it already is helping bring manufacturing back to the United States. And that means more jobs for Americans. That means more prosperity for Americans. And most the economists that are against tariffs, I've always called the free trade economists really open borders trade economists,
Right.
because while we opened our borders to trade with anybody and everybody with virtually no tariff, they were all putting tariff barriers so high that we couldn't export anything. And so that was not free trade. That was open borders trade.
Right.
And
Right.
now we have more like free trade, which we erect barriers that will enable us to trade fairly in the world market and bring more jobs at home and have more employment here, more wealth here. And we're looking towards a time of unprecedented prosperity if we can defeat the Democrats in the 2026 midterms. And that should be at the state,
Yeah.
local, and federal election. And you asked before what we need to do. We need to hammer those state legislatures to change their voting laws, get rid of mail in voting. We need to
Absolutely.
focus on local elections as well.
It's Jim Simpson. Goes by James. Go to James M. Simpson over on X. You can go follow him there. Go get his book. It's called Manufactured Crisis, The War to End America. He's got another book out the day Christmas didn't come. Go get both of those over on Amazon. You can go to crisisnow.net to find out more about this. James, incredible information. I love talking to you. Let's do it again at some point, because I want to talk to you about we're $38 trillion in debt. We're not doing anything to cause deflation and maybe start paying the debt down. We are increasing manufacturing. President Trump says he's bringing $18 trillion of investment in. I wonder what that's going to do against this gigantic, $38 trillion debt that we have. If we don't get that under control, I think they're trying to make us go broke. This is still a progressive move, in my opinion. And if they make us go broke, then they can reset everything and then, as you said earlier, take over everything. So let's do it again. I appreciate you taking the time. Great knowledge, and I hope you sell 1 billion books.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you, Jim. Merry Christmas to you as well. We appreciate you. That's it for Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. For this time, we're back with another one very soon. Make sure you subscribe.